This day in sports history. Well, hey there, and welcome to another edition of This Day in Sports History. Great to have you along for another journey around the sports history timeline. It is November 17th, and on this day, this entire football-loving nation was left in the dark after a baffling decision. A PGA Tour event played how many holes? And David Klingler and Jim Brown rolled up unprecedented numbers in different years and in different games. Those stories plus a few more for you, as well as a non-sports fun fact about cake coming up at the end. But let's start with what happened on this day in 1968, when an NFL game was interrupted by an innocent little Swiss girl. You know, it's kind of hard to believe that there was a time when the NFL was not a big deal. And in today's world of streaming, where every NFL game is available to anybody who wants it, it is kind of hard to even explain how something like the Heidi game is even possible. But 1968 was the time before streaming, before cable television, before big money contracts between the networks and sports leagues. And if you remember the story from a few months back about Monday Night Football, well, you will recall that CBS and NBC both passed on having Monday Night Football on their networks. And ABC was even reluctant because, well, of their primetime schedules. It was also a time before instant access to information. So, if you missed a game, you waited until your next local news telecast at 11 p.m. to get a score, or you read about it in the next day's paper. So this game was between rivals and the best two teams in the AFL, the New York Jets and the Oakland Raiders, and the game was broadcast around the country on NBC from Oakland. Fans watching on television saw some great football that afternoon. There was Jets quarterback Joe Namath throwing for 381 yards and a touchdown. The Raiders' Darryl LaMonica throwing for 311 yards and 4 touchdowns. The game was a seesaw affair with 6 lead changes. With the game tied at 29, Jets kicker Jim Turner kicked a field goal with 1 minute 5 seconds left in the game to give New York the 32-29 lead. The kick went through the uprights just before 7 p.m. on the East Coast. While the battle on the field raged on, there was a battle brewing at NBC. Executives eager to keep the game on the air past the prescribed time frantically called the NBC broadcast center, but nobody was answering the phone. The Raiders had the football, and when LaMonica dumped a pass off to Charlie Smith and turned it upfield for a 20-yard gain, NBC's broadcast supervisor Dick Klein switched everybody on the East Coast over to the scheduled movie presentation that Sunday night, a kids' movie titled Heidi. Phone lines blew up almost immediately. Switchboard operators were inundated with angry phone calls from football viewers on the East Coast. The calls from those NBC executives were now blocked from getting through by the flurry of calls from angry patrons. So while everybody on the East Coast watched the story of Heidi, the orphan left to live with her cold and emotionally distant grandfather in the Swiss Alps, there was a heck of a finish brewing in Oakland. And they missed this play, called by the legendary Kurt Gowdy for NBC that day.
Monica to Charlie Smith. Smith is hitting, and he scores!
And then on the ensuing kickoff, the field of horrors struck the Jets again.
They squib this one to prevent a run back. Earl Christie fumbling it around. He fumbles the ball. And Oakland has it for a touchdown. Oakland has scored 2 touchdowns in 9 seconds.
The Raiders had shocked the Jets 43-32. But here's the thing. The assumption for those on the East Coast who were watching Heidi now was that the Jets had won the game 32-29. Jets head coach Weeb Eubank called his wife Lucy to let her know when they were headed to the airport. Lucy told Weeb, "Congratulations." Now, he was a bit confused. "For what?" "On winning the game, silly. You won," she replied. "We lost," he screamed, not understanding the confusion. New York defensive back Johnny Sample remembers landing at the airport and meeting his dad. Well, his father, seeing Johnny's disappointment, asked what was wrong. He said, "You guys won, you should be happy." "No, Dad, we lost the game." With the network phone lines clogged with angry callers, fans resorted to calling the telephone company, the New York Times, and the NYPD to go do something. Football fans wanted heads on spikes outside of NBC. Now, NBC ran a scroll with the final score at 8:20 during a dramatic scene when a young girl is struggling to get out of a wheelchair and walk for the first time. And then they issued an apology later on, chalking it up to human error. Now, Klein refuted that as nonsense years later, saying he had the contract and the order to run the movie. He had no choice. He said if he had stayed with the game, a higher-up exec told him he would have been fired on the spot. But because of this game, networks then adopted the stance to stay with the game until its conclusion before switching to regularly scheduled programming. On this day in 1991, Detroit Lion offensive lineman Mike Utley was paralyzed during a game. The Lions were playing at home against the LA Rams. On the first play of the fourth quarter, Utley, as the right guard, was protecting quarterback Eric Kramer as he dropped back to pass. Rams defensive lineman David Rocker put his hands in the air to block a potential Kramer pass. Utley went to cut his legs. Rocker, doing what defensive linemen do, grabbed Utley's pads and shoved him to the ground like he'd done thousands of times before. Utley's head hit the turf, immediately injuring his 6th and 7th vertebrae. He didn't know it at the time, but he was paralyzed. After being attended by team doctors, he was placed on a stretcher with his head secured. And as he was being wheeled to the locker room, Utley wanted to reassure the crowd that he was going to be back, and he put his right thumb in the air. His paralysis from the waist down was confirmed at the hospital a little while later, and then reality began to set in for him. Here he is talking about that day and the days that followed in a 2023 interview with WDET, Detroit Public Radio.
When reality sets in and I knew I was paralyzed and my career was over, the people, the fans, the community all rallied around, helping to raise money for this foundation, the Mike Utley Foundation, for research. But the biggest deal is that my family and my Detroit Lions family, my brothers on the field, they treated me the exact same. They did not allow me to sit and waller, which I wouldn't have, but they wouldn't allow, me to sit there and complain about and woe is me kind of situation. That's the difference. No injury can change you unless you allow it to.
He established the Mike Utley Foundation soon after in an effort to support function-restoring treatment for spinal cord injuries. He has hope that someday he will be able to return to Ford Field in Detroit and walk off the field like he wishes he had been able to do back on this day in 1991. And that's the end of the first half. As the teams head to the locker room, the Spartans lead the Bulldogs by a score.
You guys stink. Geez, Coach, we're only down a couple of points. No, I mean you guys really smell. You need to hit the showers. And here, I got every one of you new bars of soap from the Sterling Soap Company. Each bar is artisan crafted using natural ingredients and essential oils. They also have shave soaps, colognes, beard balm, and a whole lot more. Now get in there. But Coach, we have another half to play. I don't care. I can't stand to be around you.
A few minutes later.
All right, bring it in tight. You guys are still playing terrible, but you're smelling great out there. Now listen, you're going to need to stock up for the rest of the season. We got a lot of tough games left. So go to sterlingsoap.com after the game. That's STIRLING soap.com. You got that? Yes, Coach. Great. sterlingsoap.com on 3. 1, 2, 3. sterlingsoap.com.
On this day in 1973, the PGA's longest stroke play tournament came to an end, with Miller Barber collecting the largest check in PGA history up to that point. In '73, this was called the World Open Golf Championship, and it was a 144-hole stroke play event. So if you've done the quick math, you will know that that is twice the normal length of a PGA Tour event. This was played at Pinehurst No. 2. A cut was made after 72 holes, with the slimmed-down field fighting it out over another 4 rounds. The dark, bespeckled Miller Barber rolled in a birdie putt on the 144th hole to win by 3 shots over then-tour rookie Ben Crenshaw. The $100,000 first-place prize was the richest in golf at the time. Now, this tournament became known by different names over its 10-year run, but it was the only time that they played 144 holes in this event. It was cut to a 72-hole event the following year until its run ended in 1982. On this day in 1990, Houston quarterback David Klingler kept up his assault on the NCAA record book, and this record is likely to never be broken. The 12th-ranked Houston Cougars were playing at home against 1AA Eastern Washington, and this was just bad timing for the Eagles. I mean, Houston was going to beat them regardless, but after the Cougars had their outside national championship hopes dashed the week previous by the Texas Longhorns, the now 9-1 Cougars had some frustrations to take out on somebody, and Eastern Washington just happened to be the sacrificial lamb. The Cougars scored on their first 6 possessions and all on TD passes from Klingler. He kept up his aerial assault in the second half, completing 41 of 58 passes for 452 yards and 11 touchdowns. Oh, and he did sit out the final 8 minutes and 24 seconds of this one. Cougar receiver Tracy Good said their defensive backs were not too fast. It was like a scrimmage, really. Klingler topped the previous record of 9 touchdown passes in a game by San Diego State's Dennis Shaw, set in 1969. And let's keep the points scoring records rolling with what happened on this day in 1959, when Jim Brown scored 43 points. This was Brown's final game at Syracuse, and he went out in a blaze of glory. He scored all 27 of their first half points with 4 touchdowns and 3 conversions. He added 2 more TDs and 4 additional PATs in a 61-7 win over Colgate. His 43 points in a game bested the 8-year-old record of 42 by Ole Miss's Arnold Showboat Boykin. Brown's record would stand for 34 years until Illinois' Howard Griffith scored 48 points in 1990. And that record is now shared with 2 others. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Do you want to see the world's oldest slice of cake? Well, book your tickets now for Switzerland. At the Alimentarium Food Museum there, you can cast your eyes on 2 ancient slices of wheat flatbread with milk and honey filling. These were discovered in an Egyptian tomb back in 1913, and they are estimated to date back to the 22nd century BCE. The copper molds they were found in served as a vacuum, preserving them. That's all I've got for you today. Come on back tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.